everyone. Welcome back to a crash course in the CMS ACCESS model. We hope you were able to join us in our prior series where we walked through some of the details regarding the mechanics of how the ACCESS model actually works. We're very excited today to cover part 2, which is the path to success within ACCESS. My name is Luis Argueso. I'm partner and co-founder of InHealth Advisors, and I'm joined on this video by Kaitlyn O'Connor, who will give a little bit more of her background shortly, but we are really excited to cover the material in this presentation. Just to give everyone an introduction to myself, my name is Luis Argueso. I am part of InHealth Advisors. We are a healthcare advisory firm that really is focused on helping organizations make the transition from fee-for-service to value-based care, and I do a lot of work with digital health companies, and so I'm really excited to talk about ACCESS. So, with that said, let me have Kaitlyn give an introduction, and then we will dive right into the overview of this presentation and the content we'll be covering.
Perfect. Thank you, Luis. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaitlyn. I'm the co-founder and partner at Elevare Law, which is a digital health law firm. I've spent a lot of my career working with digital health companies, and more recently, I am having conversations with my clients about, just similar to what Luis said, transitioning from fee-for-service to value-based care. And I believe that the CMS ACCESS model is a really important signal and a really big opportunity to do just that, to start to actually make that transition from fee-for-service to value-based care. Likely, if you're in the fee-for-service space, more as an addition to your existing fee-for-service basis. There we go. Yeah, I think it will be an additional opportunity on top of what you're already doing successfully in the fee-for-service space, and how you can now start to tie in some more performance-based, more value-based models to your repertoire. So really quickly, I am a lawyer, but I am not necessarily your lawyer. So this video is not legal advice. If you have questions or need legal advice, please make sure to reach out to a lawyer that you've actually officially engaged. Let's dive in. We are on part 2 of our series, which we've titled The Path to Success. I'm really excited for this section because this is where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of how to actually be successful. So you've probably heard a lot of information about what ACCESS is, how it's going to work, the things that, the rules that CMS has established thus far. What we want to do is we now want to take that and turn it into how to actually be successful as a digital health company. So let's just get started on that and talk about some of the practical stuff. So we've called this the path to success. We're going to talk today about the legal, operational, financial, and compliance considerations that you should be thinking about. And we're going to round out this conversation with a readiness assessment. So we're going to give you a lot of information. Then we're going to give you a way to figure out on your own how ready you are to participate in ACCESS, and maybe start thinking about what you need to do now if you think that this is going to be a good opportunity for you. So let's start with my favorite topic, which is the legal implications, the legal considerations. So if you watch the first part of the video, you may have seen that we ended that video with a blurry image that we sort of teased as the beginning of a discussion about what ACCESS really means for digital health. If you haven't watched that part, I do encourage you to go back and watch it, even, on 1.52x speed, just to get the basics. But this is the image that we ended on, that blurry image. We finally revealed it. And this, I believe, is, from a legal perspective, probably one of the most important concepts to understand if you are a digital health company and you are thinking about whether or not or how you can participate in ACCESS. Because there are really 2 paths that you can choose. I'm not aware of any other paths, but if you're out there watching this, or Luis, if you have any other ideas, let me know. But I think these are really the only 2 options that you have as a digital health company. The first is just being a provider. How do you become a provider if you are not already a provider? Or if you are a digital health company that already has a provider organization, that you are affiliated with, one or more provider organizations that you are affiliated with. How do you participate in that way? The second is sort of sticking to the support organization or enablement path, which is probably very similar if you're a digital health company that is not a provider. This enablement path is probably very similar to what you're already doing, with some slight tweaks to better incorporate concepts of the access model. So, really important point here. If you are a digital health company, while Access is built around technology and incentivizing providers to adopt technology, as we said in part one, if you are not, or if you do not have a very close affiliation with a Part B provider organization, you cannot directly participate in Access. You will not be paid directly by CMS for your digital health tools. And so the way you do that is by becoming a provider or by setting up a provider organization. What that means is, as a digital health company, particularly a company that is not currently owned by physicians or other licensed healthcare providers, you need to set up what is referred to as an MSOPC structure. That is a corporate structure with some complex documentation in place, where you, as a digital health company, do not own a medical practice, but you have a very close affiliation with one or more medical practices that you have a, I don't want to say control over, because legally you're not supposed to have too much control over that organization, but you become the manager of that organization. You handle all of the non-clinical functions, while the physician or other provider owner and the clinical team, they own all of the clinical functions of that entity. So all of that to say, it is a complex model from some perspectives. However, it is very common. It is very well defined. There is a model that most companies follow that makes it fairly easy to implement, but it takes time. So if you're a digital health company and you're not currently a provider organization, and you're thinking about, I want to be a provider, I want to submit that application to participate directly in Access, you're looking at about a 2 to 3 month timeline to get to the point where you've actually got your provider organization set up and you've enrolled in Medicare as a Part B provider. So if you're looking at the calendar and you're saying, well, it's already less than 2 to 3 months before that April 1st application deadline for Access, that's okay, but you might have to start on a much smaller scale than you were initially intending. So my rule of thumb is, if you start with one state setting up this MSOPC model, you can probably do that in about 4 to 6 weeks. You can probably have the corporate structure set up. You can probably have all the documentation in place. You can have the owner of the practices in place in about 4 to 6 weeks. And then you can start your Medicare Part B enrollment. Some can make that timeline even faster by taking parallel tracks and having multiple people sort of working on it in tandem. But I would say that I've never seen it happen more quickly than 4 to 6 weeks to get to the point where you've got your organization set up, you've got the documents signed, and you've at least submitted your Medicare Part B enrollment. It may not be approved by that 6-week timeline. It may be, depending on sort of, where you are, depending on, the information you've submitted and how quickly the MAC you submit to can review it. So 4 to 6 weeks is a rule of thumb for one state. If you want to take that and expand it into many other states, it could take longer. But 4 to 6 weeks if you want to be a provider organization and you don't currently have that infrastructure set up. And that's really just the corporate structure. As you can see in the image in front of you, there are several other considerations that come with setting up your own provider group. There is, a different level of financial risk and reward, because now you are very closely tied to a provider organization that you are not currently. There are different capabilities that you need to have in place. There's a different infrastructure. You've got to be able to support all of the functions of a medical practice or a provider group, compared to, as a digital health company that supports one or two functions within a medical group. Now you have taken on the role of supporting all of the functions, from telehealth to care coordination to data analytics to daily billing and collections for the services provided, to paying out your clinicians or supporting the practice and paying out those clinicians. So you need a lot more required capabilities, a lot more, infrastructure than you may currently have or be able to support. And then lastly, you've got a more direct engagement with CMS and with providers than you do necessarily in your traditional digital health role. So it's a much bigger undertaking than you may currently be used to. And that I think is a really important factor. So if you are thinking about, as a digital health company, becoming a provider, you probably need to start yesterday or 2 weeks ago, getting that infrastructure in place if you want to make that April 1 deadline. As an enabler, you have a more straightforward path that is probably going to feel more familiar to you. As an enabler of an access participant or a provider group that is participating directly in access, the model may not look very different from what you currently have in place. So this enablement path is you are just contracting with and partnering with provider groups that are directly participating in access. That could be your current customer base if you're already selling to provider organizations, could be your current customers, or it could be an additional revenue stream of practices that enroll in access that you don't currently serve. The takeaway being, right, you are not the provider, you are supporting the providers that are participating in access. And the core piece of access that is new that I think a lot of digital health companies are really excited about is this access tools directory. So CMS has said that they are going to set up essentially a marketplace, what they are calling the Access Tools Directory, which will allow digital health companies to self-certify and to list themselves in a directory of organizations, digital health tools that can support access providers in achieving the goals that they need to achieve to be successful in an access program. If you don't know what those metrics or those goals are, go back to part 1. We talked a lot about the outcomes aligned payments and the metrics that you need to achieve to get those. So we won't go into detail on that here, but go back to part 1, review the parts where we talk about those metrics, and then think, can I support a provider in achieving one or more of these metrics or measuring one or more of these metrics? And if so, maybe listing on that tools directory is a good idea. I will just say one sort of caveat or one sort of thing to think about, again, from the legal perspective. If you want to list yourself in that tools directory, you will be required to certify to CMS that you are compliant with all of the state and federal laws and rules and regulations that apply to you, which you don't need to do if you don't list in that tools directory. Yes, you still have to comply, but you don't have to in writing promise CMS that you are compliant. So for the legal nerds out there, that is what we like to call contract privity. If you list yourself on that tools directory and you explicitly certify in writing to CMS that you are compliant, you've now opened yourself up to privity with CMS, where now CMS has a more direct line to enforce these rules against you and to hold you accountable if you do not comply. So if you get investigated by the state for something, now CMS has a direct line to hold you accountable for whatever, mistake you may have made. I'm sure everybody here is very compliant. If you're my client, you'll never have to deal with that because we'll make sure you're set up in great shape to not have to deal with it. But I do like to remind everyone that, that tools directory is certainly exciting. It's certainly a way to get yourself in front of providers that are participating in access. But just keep in mind that you have to make a promise to CMS that you don't otherwise have to make. And you don't have to list yourself in the tools directory to support access providers. You can certainly just go out on your website and talk about access. You can sell directly to providers. But what you can't do if you don't list in the tools directory is take advantage of some of the other incentives that CMS has created for the tools that list themselves in that tools directory. So if you are a digital health company and you list yourself in the tools directory, CMS has said that you will be permitted to offer certain discounts and incentives to access model participants that find you through that directory, which outside of the directory, in some cases, may be higher risk under things like the anti-kickback statute and state level similar doctrines. So there's a little bit of a benefit where CMS has more explicitly said, if you're listed in this directory and you promise us that you're compliant with all of the rules and laws that apply to you, we're going to give you some leeway in terms of discounts that you can offer to customers. And you get right in front of those customers, those access participants who will have access to the directory. Just keep in mind, that sort of caveat where this is a marketplace where you have now made a promise to CMS that you wouldn't otherwise have to make. So those are the two paths. Again, you've got path one, which is becoming a provider, setting up that MSOPC model, taking on the infrastructure, setting up the infrastructure to manage all of the day-to-day functions of a medical practice. Or path two, which is that enablement path where you're either going to list yourself in the tools directory and just simply contract with provider organizations that participate in access, or stay out of the tools directory and just continue selling to your core sort of ICP and supporting access participants outside of the tools directory in their success in an access program. That's probably the faster path if you're thinking about that 4 to 6 week timeline that we talked about with that first option. It's not going to take you that long for option two. In fact, you could probably do it. You could probably be ready for it like today or tomorrow. Luis will talk to you a little bit more about how to make sure you can be successful there. But that's probably the faster path if you're looking at, how do I get set up for this quickly? So that's a lot of information. Please feel free to pause, rewind, follow up with any questions that you have. But I wanted to make sure that we spent some time talking about those two different paths and what they really, really mean and how long it takes to get set up for them, because I think there's a little bit more to that option one than some folks might be aware of at this stage. I'm going to pause. I'm going to pass it back over to you, Luis. Do you have anything to add on this slide before we move on to the next slide and you start talking about some of the financial and operational and clinical considerations?
Just to say that as we dive into those specific considerations, that we will make a note to kind of highlight where those considerations play a role with regard to the different organizations. Mostly what I would say is if you're looking at path two, where you're a support organization, when we talk about the capabilities that are needed, think about how your solution kind of bridges a lot of the gaps that might be covered in some of those capabilities that a provider organization may not typically excel at. So if we talk, for example, around data interoperability, FHIR capabilities, those sorts of things, APIs, that's a place where a participant that might have the right clinical model, but might not necessarily have the tech infrastructure, will want to partner with an outside tool to help them get there.
Yep, 100%.
Thank you for joining us in exploring the details of the Access model. We invite you to watch our other videos on the basics and paths to success in the Access model. We welcome outreach if you have any questions.